Good morning. Good morning. It's good to see you all here this morning. Well, I'm going to take a little break from our discussion about the Heart Sutra uh, to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, which is not a topic completely unrelated to the Heart Sutra, but I won't try to draw that connection. So here in the US, we have recently experienced a bruising electoral season. A season in which each set of candidates predicted absolute apocalypse in the event that the opponent won the election. And of course, we don't know the future. Perhaps both of them were right, or neither of them. But in any case, here we are. The election is thankfully over. There is a result. And for some, this brought out a feeling of elation, and for others, a feeling of horror, and everything in between. And each of these responses in each of us is, according to the Buddha's teaching, due to a probably complicated network of causes and conditions, only some of which we are aware. So we're not going to be talking about politics or personalities or issues, because that's not why we're here. But central to Buddhist practice is dealing with life circumstances. So that's why we're here. A few years back, I became a member of the Lay Zen Teachers Association, and I must say I haven't been a very active participant, but I do receive their emails and pay attention to threads that come and go from time to time. Most of the participants are on the West Coast and a few on the East Coast and just a scattered few in between. So there was a thread about the election. After the election, there was a thread about, well, what now? What do we do with this? And one of the respondents said something along the lines of, keep living and be kind. Well, as most of us know from our experience with internet threads, it doesn't take too long before you don't almost anything you say is shamed at some point. And there was another participant who said that this sounded like someone speaking from a position of privilege. Of course, probably everyone in the Lay Zen Teachers Association is speaking from a position of privilege. But I guess keep living and be kind sounded too casual. Considering the consequences that may arise for some individuals among us here in the United States and elsewhere in the world. So, one of my favorite 20th century Zen teachers and authors is Kosho Uchiyama. And he says repeatedly in various ways, what Zen practice is about is take care of your life, and everything you encounter is your life. Not too much different from keep living and be kind. What is it to take care of your life? It's to recruit whatever skills and resources you have going through the day to be of benefit for beings, to be of benefit for beings, to be of long-term benefit for all beings. What we've been talking about in the Heart Sutra, prajna, wisdom, is the guiding light for doing just that. So I think it's important to reflect that even though these suttas, these early teachings of the Buddha, are recorded sort of minutes from these meetings that the Buddha had with crowds of people, they all sound pretty idyllic. They're either in this garden or that garden or on top of this mountain or that mountain. But the Buddha did not live in a particularly peaceful time. At that time, it was more or less a feudal society. There were clans that dominated kingdoms, and the various kingdoms would at times go to war with one another, one kingdom trying to conquer another, or trying to settle some feud that had arisen. And in fact, there's pretty good documentation that during the Buddha's life, the kingdom of his family, the Shakya family, the Shakya kingdom, was conquered by an adjacent kingdom. The Kosala kingdom was just right next door, and there's a backstory, which I'll keep. There are many versions of this story, and probably none of them are historically accurate, but that's not the point. As the story goes, the Shakya kingdom was considered of somewhat higher prestige than the Kosala kingdom. And the king of the Kosala kingdom, King Pasenadi, was interested in taking another wife. He had several, but he wanted another. And he was particularly interested in having a princess from the Shakya kingdom as kind of a sign of prestige and also to sort of bind these two entities, to these two kingdoms together. Well, the court of the Shakya kingdom did not like the idea of sending a princess over. So they devised a plan to send the daughter of a slave over instead and inform the king Pasenadi that it was a princess. There was a very attractive daughter of a slave that King Pasenadi became enamored with and had a child, Prince Vidyudaba. And Prince Vidyudaba grew up and at some point became aware of the ruse, that he was actually the son of a slave girl. And he made an oath that he would have revenge on the Shakyas. And through one thing or another, he became king at some point and fulfilled his oath. He got together an army and marched toward the Shakya kingdom, where all of the Buddha's kinsmen lived, with the intent of rape and pillage. In the intervening centuries, we have changed the weaponry, but the essential consequences of war are pretty much the same: rape and pillage. So Prince Vidyudaba was marching down the road, and the Buddha, who was a sort of a personal friend of the Prince Vidyudaba and also of his father, had been a friend of his father, was sitting in meditation under a tree with no leaves, a dead tree. And as the story goes, Prince Vidyudaba asked him, "Why are you sitting under this dead tree, and why aren't you in the shade under a live tree?" And the Buddha responded, "The shade of my kinsman keeps me cool. The shade of my kinsman keeps me cool." And Prince Vidyudaba sort of got the message and turned his army around and went back toward Kosala. But this thought that he had in his mind, this vengeful thought, would not go away. So he, after a few days, was back at it, came down the road, and the Buddha was still there. And when he saw the Buddha, he again had another thought and second thoughts and turned his army around. So this happens 3 times. But then the 4th time, Prince Vidyudaba brings his army down the road. The Buddha realizes that there's no helping this. He's not going to be able to stop it. He packs up and leaves. And Prince Vidyudaba again goes ahead with his plan of rape and pillage of the Shakya kingdom. So I guess you can have all kinds of lessons that might arise from this story, or you might have questions about it. Well, couldn't he do more? Whatever. But it speaks to the fact that we have limited resources. We have limited skills. We do what we can. And it doesn't always turn out as we might desire. There was another time that Buddhism in China, we've been talking about the sixth and between the sixth and the eighth century when a lot of this literature that we're familiar with from the Mahayana tradition was translated into Chinese. Well, in the middle of the ninth century, there was an emperor in China who was unhappy with the foreign influence of Buddhism. And he was a Taoist and had a number of Taoist advisors. And they decided to rid China of this influence. And they proceeded, a pretty good documentation that they proceeded to destroy thousands of temples, tens of thousands of shrines, and probably about 250,000 monks and nuns probably they were not killed, but they were forced into lay life and turned into good workers and taxpayers for the emperor. And that ended the high point of Buddhism in China, actually. So Buddhism is not really tailored only to good circumstances. It was actually devised by the Buddha to deal with difficult circumstances, to deal with old age, sickness, and death, to deal with sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair, with association with the unbeloved, with separation from the beloved, with not getting what you want. Dukkha, sometimes translated as suffering, other times as distress or unsatisfactoriness. So Buddhist practice then was formulated for times that are difficult, applicable to times that are favorable as well, but specifically formulated for times that are difficult. So coming back to this statement, keep living and be kind. It speaks to a quality of equanimity. And the Buddha included equanimity as one of the four divine abodes, the four Brahma Vihara. Equanimity, even-mindedness, equius, equal, animus, mind or spirit, balance. But in talking about equanimity, I think it's important to emphasize what equanimity is not. It's not apathy or indifference or fake serenity. It's not passivity. It's not joylessness. So keep living and be kind. I don't think it's bad advice, whether you're in a time of privilege or at a position of persecution. Buddhist practice is for all circumstances, favorable, what we might view as favorable, what we might view as unfavorable. Keep living and be kind. So I think I'll stop there, and uh, we'll have a discussion in the breakout rooms, and then get back together in a few minutes. But again, we're not here to talk politics. But I think it is helpful to share how you're feeling, how are you dealing with it, how are you applying Buddhist principles and practice to this present circumstance. Thank you very much for listening today, and be back with you shortly.